Our next speaker is Dr. Michael Jacobson. He's the co-founder and executive director of the Center for Science and Public Interest, a CSPI. It's a nonprofit health advocacy organization battling obesity, cardiovascular disease, and other health problems using education, legislation, litigation, and other tactics. Dr. Jacobson has written numerous books and art reports, including 6 Arguments for a Greener Diet and Salt, the Forgotten Killer. He received the 2010 Hero Award from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Foundation and the American Public Health Association's 2011 David P. Rowell Award for Advocacy in Public Health. Jacobson is also the creator of National Food Day, October 24th.
Thank you very much, Grant. Is this thing on? You can hear me? Thank you very much. It's really exciting to be here. Whoever would have thought about a food law society some years ago? It's amazing to see how many young people and old people are interested in what the food is made of, where it comes from, how it's served, and 100 other aspects of food. I've been involved in, and my organization has been involved in food labeling for a long time. And I think the first time was in 1972. We had a student intern, and I was drinking a beer with him in our office. And we looked at the label to see what the ingredients are, and there were no ingredients listed. Can you imagine that? Because the law says all the ingredients have to be listed on a food label. And so we looked into it a little and discovered, well, that's the Food and Drug Administration. But the FDA kicked it over to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms in the Treasury Department, which doesn't give a hoot about ingredients of the alcoholic beverages. They just want to collect the revenues from the taxes. So we petitioned the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms to require the ingredients to be listed. And they said no, and we sued, and it just went on for years and years and years. And finally, we reached an agreement where we got a few ingredients to be listed, ones that posed a health concern. But the issue is actually still a live issue. Why aren't the ingredients listed? And what we discovered, if you go to the CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, you'll see several hundred ingredients that can be used in beer, wine, and liquor. You know, it's foaming agents, anti-foaming agents, foam enhancers, colorings, preservatives. And one of these chemicals, which got our interest, was cobalt sulfate, which was actually killing people in the late 1960s. When alcoholics drank cobalt sulfate treated beer, they sometimes would die, which is not good. But that didn't weigh into the Treasury Department's decision. And we've been involved in a lot of food labeling issues over the years. We led the effort to win passage of the 1990 Nutrition Labeling and Education Act. I think it was 2004, the allergen labeling legislation, and some other things. And so I wanted to talk about, I think I'm going to give you some examples of kind of where the battles are. We're down there in the trenches and very active on these issues. And then I'll talk about some of the constraints and possible remedies, or at least desires, if not remedies. And I'm going to leave to other speakers all the discussion about organic and country of origin and GMOs and some of the other issues. Think of a label, you know, it's this big. Think of it as a battleground, where that's the industry's way to get you to buy the product. They want to make it as tempting, as beautiful looking as possible. And then the consumer wants information. Usually consumer wants honest information. And so there's that tension between the industry and the consumer. There's also a tension between providing all the information that any consumer might want and the amount of information that can fit on a label that the human brain can comprehend and deal with before it just shuts off, which is a big issue in different aspects of the label. And something I'm definitely not going to get into, because my degree's in virology, not law, is First Amendment law, which is very important in terms of health claims and nutrient content claims in foods. So let me show some examples of food labels. And it literally does go from soup to cereals. This is a Campbell soup commercial. You see that guy eating the soup. It's a microwavable container. He stuck it in the microwave, then he took it out, and guess how much of that container he's going to eat? The whole thing. That's what it was designed for. Why does Campbell list 2 servings per container? Well, one reason is their soups are loaded with salt, and so he's going to get 1,600 milligrams, but with their labeling, he's going to think, at least if he doesn't think all that much, he's going to get only 800 milligrams. And we've been doing a lot of litigation over the last 5 or 6 years on food marketing, including labeling. And we're looking for a plaintiff for a lawsuit here. The all-natural, you've seen it on countless foods. So this is all natural, except for the high fructose corn syrup, where corn starch is broken down into glucose molecules, and then some of the glucose molecules are converted into fructose molecules. It is not natural. And Kraft ended up agreeing with us. They took the all-natural label off the product, but it was kind of a Pyrrhic victory because they replaced it with another deceptive statement that we don't think we could sue on. So chalk that one-to-one on that. This is a common deception on grains. Made with whole grains. Plain made with whole grain down at the bottom. Well, the main ingredient is white flour. Our nutritionist says when you see a label that says made with whole grains, you should translate it into made with very little whole grains. This was our litigator's first case. Blueberry waffles. And you see it has the blueberries right next to the waffle, and it has the blue specks in the waffle. And what do you think those are? Those are not blueberries, they're blueberry bits of sugar, hydrogenated vegetable oil, artificial coloring, artificial flavoring, and some other ingredients. So we didn't think that was fair. So we told Aunt Jemima, owned by Pinnacle Foods, that we were going to sue, and they came around to an agreement, which is a good lesson. So this label was negotiated, and they put in with imitation blueberries, which was good. Too bad they didn't take out the imitation blueberries and put in actual blueberries. But that's a lot more expensive to do. Then we negotiated over the number of blueberries that they could depict on the label. We didn't want any. They wanted a lot. So you see the compromise. And so when you're threatening to go to court, or you do go to court, you have to compromise very often. So at least you get something. So now people know they're imitation blueberries, and that's an advance for humankind. Here's another whole grain one. This is made by Sara Lee. And whole grain white bread. Does anybody know what it is? Is it whole grain? Is it white? Is it half and half? Is it a mixture? There's actually a light-colored wheat variety that companies are using. So they could make whole wheat that looks white. Is it that? Well, we met with Sara Lee. We told them we were going to sue them. And we got them to make a change. And we really wanted to sue them because usually our lawyers got a really good sense of humor. And we have a good time in some of these negotiations. Their lawyer was so stony-faced, so humorless, that it wasn't much fun. But we got an agreement out of them. where they would actually disclose the whole grain content of the product, which is in advance, let people know, gave them that piece of information. It's the kind of thing that should be on a lot of other grain products that are not whole grain. So V8 Splash, V8 juice is 100% vegetable juice. And they play on that. People are predisposed to thinking that a V8 product is 100% fruit, in this case, fruit juice or not. It's mango peach. Well, give V8 credit because it actually does have a little bit of mango puree and peach juice. But the main juices are, well, it's not mainly juice. It's only 10% juice. The rest is sugar water. And the more predominant juices are carrots and apples. This is a good one. You asked about how can companies give consumers what they want? Is there something in it for both? Consumers want fat-free. Companies like to put that on the label. Pam, which is 100% oil, 100%, puts fat-free on the label. And the reason they got away with it is, look at the serving size, 1/3 of a second. Can a human being push down and release that thing in 1/3 of a second? No. Here at least, they've started putting how many grams it is, 0.266 grams. I never saw a food label down to the third decimal. So a consumer can figure if they do a 5-second spray, they can multiply 15 times 0.266 quickly in their mind. I'm sure you've done it. And figure out how many grams they're really getting. Well, this is really deceptive. And the FDA deserves the blame because they set the serving sizes. And I assume 1/3 of a second is what was, somehow the FDA figured it out. Here, juice treats, and there's pictures of kind of fake blueberries and fruit medley, natural cherry, grape, orange, pineapple, peach. It's like a farmer's market right in this one product. Well, it's sugar and corn syrup. Those are the basic ingredients in this product. Vitamin water. How many of you drink vitamin water? Good. At least there are 3 honest people here. Good. Very popular. Vitamins plus water, all you need. What about the sugar? It has half as much sugar as Coca-Cola. So we have a lawsuit. That's owned by Coca-Cola. We have a lawsuit against the company on this and have gotten past a motion to dismiss. This was a classic from Kellogg. Now help support your child's immunity because it has these vitamins in it. Too bad there's no evidence that they really support immunity. They don't say boost immunity because that would turn into a health claim. And they can't do that without permission, but they get around it by making just support. And that's called a structure and function claim. The city of San Francisco went after Kellogg on this, and Kellogg dropped the claim. Arizona iced tea. They've had a line of RX, prescription, medical, must be good for you, memory. This was, we joined a lawsuit against the company on this because there's no evidence whatsoever that this product boosts memory or protects your memory. It has ginseng and ginkgo and some other stuff in there. And we lost that case. I don't know if the products are still being made or not. I saw them on the internet last night, and so I assume they're still being distributed. But just pure deception. This is another good one. Can you read the ingredients? They don't show up very well, but they're actually written there. The FDA, I think it's in the statute that says ingredient lists must be conspicuous and easy to read. And so this is black print and on a dark background. It's extremely difficult to read in real life. And that there should be it's just obviously in violation of the law. So those are the kinds of products. The supermarket, you could probably go through there, find 100 products along these lines. Not every product. I don't want to convey that every product is deceptively labeled. But there are a couple of issues here. One is enforcement, and that reflects most of the slides that I showed you. The FDA just isn't there. The previous speaker talked about resources, and that's the excuse that the FDA gives for not going after all these labels. And when we go after these labels, it's one label at a time. We went after General Mills's fruit roll-ups, where they have all these different varieties. The plaintiff only had purchased the strawberry variety, and it's the only one where we could get resolution on, so that the company's going to have to say contains no strawberries, but not for raspberry flavor, mixed fruit flavor, all the others. So, it's time-consuming, laborious, and resources are involved. But the FDA is a big agency. They do have quite a few resources. They got, lots of lawyers working on food issues, a lot of scientists, other people, and they have more clout than the little Center for Science in the Public Interest. They could make an announcement to the food industry that they're going to crack down beginning April 1st. And the food industry would hop, believe me. The only time I could remember the FDA really, 2 times. One was in 1990 when Commissioner Kessler came in, and he told Procter & Gamble that he was going to seize their mislabeled Citrus Hill orange juice. They claimed it was fresh, but it wasn't. And they thumbed their nose at him. And Kessler said, OK, let's seize the product. And he actually seized the product. It hadn't been done in decades in the food field. So that was one time that really sent chills through the food industry. And then we wrote a report. And if you want to read more about food labeling deception, we have a report that's on the internet called Food Labeling Chaos that just has dozens and dozens of examples like this. And so we published the report, met with FDA, and a year later, they went after about 15 or 20 deceptively labeled products at one time. They sent warning letters to the companies. And when we went back a couple of years later, we found that in almost every case, the company had stopped making the claim. So that it's not that resource intensive to send a warning letter to a company. But the FDA is, their food division is pathetic. And they seem to do as little as possible. It takes them forever. When Republicans are in power, they don't want to do anything. When the Democrats are in power, they want to do something, but they can't do it for one reason or another. So the enforcement of state, and usually we bring cases under state consumer protection law, the enforcement, so-called enforcement, is up to state governments, which do almost nothing. City of San Francisco and other cities can do things. Very occasionally they do. States occasionally take action. And then private attorneys are beginning to see this as a profit center and are getting into it and suing companies over deceptive labeling. So those are kind of the areas, the potential progress on this issue. The other thing is we need broader regulations. And I'll give you some examples of the kind of regulations we would like to see. So this is ingredient statements. One of the most important things on food labels, because that's what people can read, or a lot of it is English words, some aren't, as compared to all the numbers in a nutrition label, which I'll get to in a minute. The one on the left is an actual nutrition label, and the label writers, the companies, use every trick in the book to make them hard to read. So it's a sans serif font, It's all capital letters. It's right justified. And oftentimes, this is only slightly condensed, squeezed together. Some are more condensed. And every one of those things makes the label harder to read. So we translated that label, same ingredients, into a more readable format to where we put bullets between each ingredient. We separated major from minor, that some companies do, upper and lower case, a serif font. And up at the top, you'll see percentage of some of the key ingredients, maybe ones that are mentioned on the front of the package, so that people know how much is there, and it's not just pure guesswork. We're working on a bill with a Democratic legislator in the House, and it'll be a fairly comprehensive bill to deal with make these improvements, deal with those deceptive labels that I showed earlier, but it doesn't have much of a chance of passage because nothing the Dems do in the House gets passed. It's just dead. But we want to get a bill in to serve as a marker and then hopefully improve on the bill and gain more political support. We need new regulations for nutrition labels, nutrition facts labels, and the FDA is working on those. It's been working on them for years, and they've been threatening to propose the regs, and hopefully later this year they'll come out. And let me just, the one on the left is an actual nutrition label. The one on the right we have modified a little bit. And so we've emphasized calories. We listed how many calories in the whole box as well as per serving. And we highlighted some of the problems like saturated fat and added sugars, where if something is high, we put it in red and put in the word high that every person can read. And we replaced sugars with added sugars. Naturally occurring sugars in a food are not a problem at all. The sugars in a peach or a glass of milk, they've never caused a health problem. But it's the added sugars. That's where we get the bulk of our sugars. And I think the FDA is considering either adding that added sugars line or replacing sugars with added sugars. And you see down here at the bottom, we got rid of that box of 2,000 calories and 2,500. That's useful to some people, but it takes up a lot of space. And a challenge is somebody's faced with all these numbers. How do you deal with it? And that was one of the things that got me interested in nutrition, that I wanted to understand how healthful a food is. And I was looking at a nutritional value of something, and it's high in sodium and high in protein and low in saturated fat, but low in vitamins. Is that good or bad? Who knows? So there's efforts now to have a simpler system on the front of the package to convey in a more comprehensible way how good a food is. And there's some very interesting approaches, none of which the food industry likes. So the food industry has come up with facts up front, which they're beginning to put on food labels. You'll see them on cereal labels for sure, where they list 4 so-called bad nutrients and then 2 good nutrients. And they're pulling out some of the most important information from the side label up to the front label. And it's a lot of numbers. It's hard to integrate into your mind. No indication really about high, medium, low, things that are really understandable to the average person who's not a nutritionist. So people have proposed a whole variety of other things that are being used. On the left is Hannaford supermarkets, which are somewhere north of here, where a food will get either 0, 1, 2, or 3 stars, according to how good it is. And most people know that 3 stars is better than 2 stars. And the one up above is great for you. That's Walmart and American Heart Association. Either you meet their good criterion for good food, or you don't. So you can go to a supermarket and hopefully anything that has one of those symbols on it, you could feel pretty safe that it's reasonably healthful for you. And the criteria are okay, not fabulous. The one at the upper right is developed by some professor at Yale medical school, where he has a system not 0 to 3, but 1 to 100. Everybody can figure out if food has a higher score, it's better for you, and so get a salad dressing with a score of 50 rather than 40. And the British government has been using what they call traffic light symbols, where where they use color coding, red, yellow, or green, or red, for those 5 elements there, along with the percentage of your daily limit and the actual gram amount. And sometimes they use high, medium, or low. And some supermarkets are using that approach. The industry doesn't like it. And the industry will fight to its death to keep a red, bad for you symbol off the package. A simpler way to do this would be to have 1 dot, red, yellow, or green. The industry likes the green. So those are some of the things. And the FDA is considering doing something on front of package. And this can be done by regulation, probably better, maybe better than legislation, although a law could give the FDA a deadline. We first petitioned on this around 2005, I think, 2006. And one thing that you'll discover is that things take forever in Washington or in court. I mean, you can spend decades in court also, which is one reason we like to settle out of court. But you really have to be patient with these issues because they're complicated. Industry can put its foot down and pretty much stop anything it wants. So let me stop there, and hopefully there's time for, you're the timekeeper. Did you say 15 more minutes? Okay.
Right.
Yes,
and just really quickly, just because some new people walked in, I just want to remind everybody that can you please identify your name and your affiliation, use a mic, the button's right on the table, otherwise it won't be picked up by the video, and that this is being videotaped, so if you have a question you would prefer to ask in private and or not have show up on the internet, that would probably be advisable to do so in private. Thank you.
Tell us how you got there.
We came from humble beginnings.
Michael, can you repeat the question, please? Just because her
yeah. Louisa was prefacing it by saying it's probably a dumb question. But as long as we have that on videotape. How did Little CSPI, a small nonprofit group, we have about 50 staff people now, get the power to have some influence? And I think it really has come from our scientific credibility. And we try to be right. And when I write something, I try to keep Ralph Nader, with whom I worked when I first went to Washington, on one shoulder and the food industry on another shoulder. Ralph wagging his finger at me saying, "You're not going far enough, Michael." And the food industry saying, we're gonna find everything possible wrong with whatever you're saying. And so we try to be right. That's one thing. And we also stick to the science. We don't bullshit. We don't make things up. We don't pretend things are what we wish they were, but we accept what they are and try to go from there. And so the food industry, government, and journalists trust us because we stick to the facts and we don't try to trick people. Now somebody's going to prove me wrong. Yeah.
Hi, Rachel Carmody. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the Center for Systems Biology here. I recently participated in a conference looking at how energy values are calculated for food labels. And one of the things that came out of our symposium is that even when the science is implemented correctly, so for example, when the Atwater system is used to determine the calorie values that get reported on these labels, that they can be incorrect. And so I'm wondering, in the context of these kinds of improvements to the nutrient facts panel, which you're talking about, which I think are great, how do you interpret correctly whether something is good for someone, something is of medium nutrient value, or something is, you know, unhealthy, when even when the science is implemented correctly, it can be wrong?
Well, I think that for calorie labels, calories is one aspect, and maybe they're a little wrong, but in the greater scheme of things, it probably doesn't matter all that much. And like with menu labeling at restaurants, the numbers aren't going to be exactly right, but you know, kind of within some range, they'll be pretty good. And it's the same thing with a lot of these, like with saturated fat. There are different saturated fats. Some are not terribly harmful, others are more harmful. So there are compromises, and that gets to the issue of how much complexity can you stand? And so I like a system that's one number, like 0 to 100, or either a binary, it's on the label, or it's not on the label. Something pretty simple, because the nutrition facts label is really complicated. I see a lot of people looking at the package, and some people, some people are probably really studying the numbers to try to figure out, does it have enough protein compared to the calories? And other people are looking at it and saying, what the hell are all these numbers doing here? You know, they have no idea what it is. So they're compromises. And then also, if you want to make it worse, individual variability. You know, should a label be connected to your, an analysis of your genes to know what it really means for you? You know. Yes.
Hi, Lorian Urban from the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy. I know that litigation has been a major tool that CSPI has used, and I'm just wondering if there are other tools in your kit that have been successful, or if you think litigation is the only way to go.
Oh no, litigation is not the only way to go, and it's not the best way either, because it's labor-intensive, and we can only go after one product at a time. Pressuring regulatory agencies is a way to go. Getting legislation is important. Sometimes getting states to act can be a catalyst. So on menu labeling, we got laws passed in first New York City, and then there's a different law passed in California, and then Seattle had a quite different law, and that helped force industry to the table to accept a federal law. But you know, there are a bunch of tools. You know, the internet. You know, with this morning, Good Morning America featured a petition that was on change.org to try to force Kraft to get rid of yellow 5 and yellow 6 from their macaroni and cheese. You know, so just publicity occasionally. Now, Kraft is not crumbling under that pressure, but that's another thing, and publicity is important. And academic papers are very important to provide a basis for to provide a foundation on which the same or other people can demand that the government do something. You know, all of those things are hard. Education is easy. You know, we can spew out booklets and all that stuff, and it's useful, but it's so low leverage. But the high leverage things take huge, huge effort and persistence. And that's another thing, Louisa, the persistence that we've been lucky to have some of the same staff people for, our nutritionist has been with us since 1978, and other people have been with us 15 or 20 years. And so all that institutional memory is very valuable.
Time for one more question. Sorry.
Hi, Elena Mahaly. I'm coming from Vermont Law School. I'm a student there. I'm curious, you were talking about enforcement and specifically talking about how FDA's food division is pitiful and how they don't have, well, they claim they don't have the resources to enforce it. And then there's your organization out there doing some enforcement as well. And I'm curious, as you can, this isn't the first time I've heard complaints from an organization about an agency's ability to enforce their regulations, and I'm curious if you can just touch on what you feel like is the most effective dance between the agency and an organization like yours, and how do you create the most effective patchwork of enforcement?
Well, you know, one thing is just simply to talk to the agency and understand what some of their constraints are, or encourage them to take action. And we succeeded in getting the FDA to do that little spurt a few years ago. Another thing would be to get members of Congress to pressure the agency, to have a hearing, put something in an appropriations bill to push them further. And I've heard the previous speaker, Professor Roberts, mentioned Peter Hutt, who was with the agency in the early 1970s. And I remember, that's when I started this work in the early 70s. And people back then told me they just don't have time to work on deceptive food labeling. It's only economic fraud. It doesn't kill people. And the FDA's highest priority is to stop immediate deaths. And that's why foodborne illnesses are such a high priority. When there's an outbreak of E. coli poisonings and several people die, that gets headlines, and the FDA has to work on it. And that really is what terrifies the public. And the food industry recognizes that. And we've worked actually very closely with the food industry and drug industry to get FDA greater funding to work on food issues, not specifying what issue it is. But you know, kind of the bigger picture, you know, so what about deaths that don't occur so quickly, like from trans fat or salt, that are causing maybe 100,000 deaths each year? You know, just an enormous number. But the dead bodies don't have a tag in them saying it was salt that did it. And that makes the issue a very low priority. And the FDA does have to work on food poisonings, but there should be enough resources to work on other things. And they also fear losing. And we don't have to fear losing as much as the FDA does, because if the court interprets the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act in a very narrow way, that can hurt the agency for many years. So they don't want to take chances. So, thank you very much.